part 5 here. I think we'd gotten up to modernization theory. Modernization theory was driving people in the 50s and 60s, trying to say, oh, if you do the same things that France did 300 years ago, in 300 years ago, you, Burundi, will be as rich as France, which doesn't really sort of take into account um, how the world actually works. This whole history of since 1492 shows that the system was designed in a certain way, and that's Burundi has inherited certain position within the world system that emphasizes extraction. It's never going to succeed if it keeps following those rules. It says that capitalism is natural. This is where you have third world. This is all from modernization theory. It's very, very old and backward to talk about the third world. In any case, dependency theory is its replacement in the 70s and 80s. This was talking, remember, India was banned from having factories back in the 19th century because it would compete. They were part of the British Empire, even though they weren't really citizens. They were, it was deindustrialized, right? It wasn't, they weren't just poor, they had been impoverished by the British government. It wasn't that there was a lack of development there. It wasn't a lack of factories. It was a underdevelopment. Factories were banned. They couldn't build them even if they had tried. So that's what, dependency theory says, wait a minute, that's not exactly how it works. How it actually worked was dependency, not independence. In any case, it was seen as something of a conspiracy, leftist conspiracy type theory with the man trying to keep the little man down and all that. So the compromise between the two is world systems theory, which takes into account the autonomous rules by which capitalism plays, but also the very real necessity of rich to maintain their dominance in the system. So it's a global economic system, international division of labor. Remember the core, periphery, and the semi-periphery. We have three labor sectors. The primary labor sector is the extraction, and that occurs in the semi-periphery. The secondary labor sector is manufacturing, and that occurs in the periphery. So the semi-periphery is the poor countries, also known as the third world or the basket cases of economics. And then the secondary labor sector, manufacturing, dominates in the peripheral economies of China or Russia, where they have very heavy industry sort of dominant. And then in the core, you have the tertiary labor sector, which is service. So remember the video we watched with the Hunger Games and all that. Basically, extractive manufacturing and service sector jobs. You should know something about mining or farming or fishing. For manufacturing, it should be something like working in a factory. And then in service sector, you can think about soft skills, training, education, bachelor's degree, accountant, sales, and that sort of thing. Leave Max Weber off of this. We didn't talk about him. Industrial Revolution, industrial capitalism comes about around 1815 in England, and so that's what we have today: commodity capitalism. So this section, okay, so that the world systems theory is important. I don't know how many times I can not say important until it's important. Then when we're talking about commodity capitalism, sort of the new kind of capitalism, the old kind of capitalism is maybe the 1100s up until 1815, and then after that we have the new kind of capitalism with industrial production, with those factories. Things did change. So Locke's social contract theory. Remember, the U.S. is built on John Locke, and others of the Enlightenment. This idea that society is voluntary and conscious decisions to work together. And how silly that was, because we're anthropologists and we know that society has been around for millions of years. People have been living in societies and communities and with political organization and economic organization from chimpanzees and even some of the monkeys. Locke's social contract theory, where did that come from? This idea that people are autonomous individuals who should be free to make their own decisions. This comes from from the economy. So the economy is based on distribution. Sorry, the old-fashioned way, prior to 1815, um, the capitalism is based on distribution. Remember, buying low and selling high, buying low, silk low in the Asia and selling it high on the other side of the world. This is how money was made through arbitrage, they call it. After 1815, then it switches, it changes to production. Um, so we have money being made in the production process from the labor of the workers. So remember the proletariat, the workers, the bourgeoisie, the owners. The labor comes from the surplus value from labor in the production process. Important. Be sure you know that. Remember the little chart with the two factories and the capitalists at the top and the workers with the raw materials and the workers and the products and the big figure eights, all that. That's very important. Let's see. Yes, that labor wages illustration from the lecture with the two factories. So means of production. That's the materials and the tools and such to produce it. The wages is the money paid to the sorry, the wages paid to the worker. The raw materials are bought by the capitalists. The result is commodities or products. Um, when those workers get paid and go to buy stuff, then they turn into consumers, and that is their point of power. Remember that. Alienation results from the separation of the workers from the means of production and from one another, because everything is mediated by money. And so that's where that alienation, that's where that isolated individual comes from. It wasn't the beginning of society, it was the end of capitalism. And that's why we are all bowling alone, etc., completely separated out from each other. And how much worse now? So laissez-faire capitalism is how the sort of John Locke's conclusion here. This is how it should work. Oh goodness. Adam Smith is writing about laissez-faire capitalism. Just let things happen, let it go. Sort of free market. Wealth of Nations, 1776. Britain is the first industrial economy. British colonialism in North America. Inflation as the driver of colonialism. Let's see. Oh, right. Remember that the frontier is a goal for investors who are looking for a hedge to their investments, something that is moving at a different rate of rise and fall than what's going on in the core. And then debtors, people who are deeply in debt and struggling, see the frontier as an escape from debt. So this is American history with the movement west and the stealing the lands of the Indians to give to settlers who are freeing themselves from debt. Britain turns out as a banking center because Britain is sort of at the center of this industrialization with the global capitalism. Legacy of capitalism, destruction of indigenous worlds, of course, they need that land. The settlers need the land, and so they have to get rid of the natives living there. New world indigenous population decline until the 20th century, in which it bounces back, and we have more Native Americans today than we ever have in the history of the Americas. Removal to least valuable lands. There's greater success for the larger chiefdoms. Remember the Maori maintaining a little more equality within New Zealand. Let's see. Economics and technology. We're talking about foragers and forager foodways. We're back to the text here. Bans. Let's see. Social density. Sexual division of labor, men versus women. They're mainly egalitarian and cooperative, so they're mainly equal. The foragers, these are hunter-gatherers in these bands. are nomadic. They move around in sort of regular circuits. Reciprocity is how things are exchanged. There's reciprocity, there's redistribution, and there's market exchange. So among reciprocity, we have generalized reciprocity and then balanced reciprocity. So generalized reciprocity involves um, basically the gift economy, people giving stuff back and forth without ever accounting for what it costs, and not really worried about the time span is very long for when they have to pay it back. They don't really have to pay it back; they just gift something in exchange. These are among food producers. Hunter gatherers, hunter gatherers have more generalized reciprocity. Food producers, horticulturalists. These are people who are growing food, remember, but not in the same land for year after year after year after year. Uh, Lots of leveling um, um, mechanisms, ways for keeping people equal. Swing cultivation, again, we're talking about slash and burn. The second kind of reciprocity that they're talking about in the textbook is balanced reciprocity. That's where they do keep track of the value of the object that they're trading. They're not really trading it; they're gifting it back and forth. But there is an idea that you should be giving something back of a greater value or equal value at least. The Kula ring. This was important. Remember the Kula ring, where they are trading Sulava and Mwali, the long strings of shells, and then the armbands. In the Trobriand Islands off the coast of Papua New Guinea, Bronislaw Malinowski, our famous Polish anthropologist who lives with the Trobrianders and learns about the Kula ring during World War I.